It's nice. Needs to. That really nice ladies' coach. Just a bit of a coincidence. Yeah, maybe opposite the Karen. I thought you were a sailor in the briefing room. The protectors at that time were the sort of thing I now use for doing a talk. But they were that size with 3 big guns in them, and they were over 8,000 quid then.
Yes, absolutely. I want to come down here.
This is floodplain 1, and it's excellent. I think we're about to go and get the start. So.
Good evening, everyone. I promise you I wasn't self-isolating down there. It's just I didn't realise there was another seat for me to sit in. I'm going to be very quick because there's a lot for you to get through technically this evening about how to make your objections, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about why I'm supportive of all the action that you're going to be taking. So I worked in the Bull when I was a teenager. I lived in Henfield High Street when I first moved back to Sussex. I was living in Sayers Common when I first became a parish councillor in Hurstby Point. So I know the area really well. I know the flooding and I know the wonderful people and places, and it was really great to be back in the High Street this evening. Sadly no butcher, that's really disappointing. And I had a great time living in this area and felt very much back in love with Sussex. I had a hiatus in Hampshire, an unplanned one, but I'm back now in Haywards Heath, and that's where we're going to have 3,500 houses in the Northern Arc. That's about double the size of Bolnor. And we know what could come here if the action isn't taken by the 30th of March. And this is again the time to fight on, and it's difficult. We've got a wide-ranging public health challenge. We're not going to be feeling necessarily inclined to go into battle, but this is the time to make the points. And I think, Geoff, the key points about personal impact, about planning reasons, unsustainable planning reasons, those queues, the air quality, the challenges. You may have heard Andrew's speech in the House of Commons this week. I had the pleasure of hearing it, where he raised the point around flooding, and the Secretary of State for Local Government and Housing and Communities raised the issue of flooding. It's going up the political agenda, and it's really important that you raise this here. So you've got supportive councillors, you've got supportive MPs, and you have got many people in this room, and I'm looking to see friends and neighbours and people that I've known for a long time, and new faces and people that know this area incredibly well. I go back to the 80s and spending too much of my childhood in the Royal Oak pub, certainly in the garden, that is, I promise you, when they used to have the swing. I didn't break it. But you know how precious this area is. And we're right on the edge of the South Downs National Park. Why are people looking at trying to put some houses here? Because trees and gateposts don't vote. But the reality here, we've got between the inter-parishes group of 29,000 people. That's pretty much a quarter to a half of my electorate. You know, this really matters, but because it's spread across different constituencies, different district borders, this means that potentially if you don't come together, it's diluting, and don't think that's not accidental. So for me, it's so important that you use this time to make sure that the voice is loud and heard. And nobody in this room, I think, is anti-housing. Everybody hopefully has got somewhere nice to go home tonight. And we want people to have the right homes and the right place and the right opportunities we've had. And actually, would it be the right thing, looking at that flooding, to sell people homes in that place? To ask them to commute to Sussex to Haverty? 60% of my commuters are out commuters. There's not enough local jobs, and we've got shops which are empty and not being supported because people are spending all day elsewhere. Now, where are these people going to come from, and what are they going to do in terms of adding value? Well, we don't know the answer to this. So the reality is we've got to make a stand, and I'm here to support Andrew and all the councillors and all the work that Lambs have done, and the inter-parish group. That's brilliant work that you've put together over the last 7-8 years, and it's tiring and it's hard work and it gets wearing. But this is the time that Horsham know the answer is not Mayfield here. It's nothing against the people who may think it's a great idea, the people in the housing association or whoever, but the reality, we know it's not the right thing. And in our hearts, we know that. So make sure we all come together and make a change. So I'm here to work with Andrew, to work with Anthony, to work with Geoff. But I've been a councillor on a parish council and also on a district council making the planning decisions, and it's got to be sound planning reasons. You can put the emotive stuff, but the practical, real reasons and the personal impact is really, really important. So make sure that we do this. There are other options that Horsham has. And obviously we've now got the new Brownfield Homes Fund, which is 400 million in a housing fund to make sure that we focus on Brownfield. And this is frustrating for me because I've got centre of Burgess Hill, which is, in the evening is, you know, empty. There isn't much going on. The town is really, really lacking. And we don't have the support that we have for the next stage there. So we don't need a new town. We need to invest and push into our existing towns and villages and support them. Why don't we go to Barcelona or Madrid on a holiday on a short weekend, because it's a vibrant, buzzy city, something different, and there's something going on all the time. And we know as a government that that's not happening in our towns and in our cities, and we need to do something about that. And just pulling people away, having to get into their cars, having to get them to commute, and eventually find some job that they can get to, that's not the answer. We need to make sure that our towns are vibrant and the support is there. And we know the answer isn't here and the Mayfield's development. So I have every support that I can give you in terms of helping Andrew and working with the other councillors. I know that Joy Dennis is here to make sure that when something goes into Horsham from us as members of Parliament and the lobbying that we can do in Westminster about the right homes in the right places and the right size of homes, I just don't believe it's here. and nobody in this room would think the same, else you wouldn't be here this evening. So we've got to spread the word, use the time, and we as MPs will try very hard to follow in the footsteps of Nick and Sir Nicholas to make sure that when the message gets to Westminster, if it gets through to planning inspector or other areas, that we're here to support you. So use the time and use those arguments, use what you know, because it will be very powerful, and this is the key moment. This is the third time and hopefully lucky. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mims, indeed. Really appreciate you coming. So I'm going to start off with Trevor Brown, who I think is going to talk a little bit about the flooding and...
Did we get it in? I can't really think I have much to say here, having just watched that video. In fact, there's a gentleman at the back. I remember, in fact, was it before Christmas? He was out on the streets on the 281, actually trying to stop idiots in cars, driving by, pushing the water from the road into the front of his house and trying to wave them down. We both tried to wave them down. They were trying to plough on towards the Mock Bridge, which was shut. Not only just shut, but in fact the water was pouring over the parapet. So in fact it was impassable. White Van Man tried. I think 4 of them were actually pulled out by the fire brigade. What flooding. I think one of the things to remember, and I'm by the way, you should know, I'm going to talk about a report which is available online in all sorts of different places. The author's at the back, so I'm going to be marked later as well. I get this right, because the author of that report, the expert, is standing at the back watching me at this moment. I can see you. I know you're there. One thing to bear in mind: there's a difference between floodplains and flooding and groundwater drainage. We see both in the pictures you've actually seen. When the councils talk about floodplains, that's water that pours out of the rivers or out of the sea, not poor drainage off the land. So remember that there's two different things, and if people say there's no flooding in certain parts, there may not be from the river, but there will be from poor drainage. So I think it's important to remember that. One of the things, I know there are people from Shermanbury because I've seen them. One of the things they know I've said before at the meetings we've had is if you look at the Regulation 18 documents, you'll see that in fact Horsham have written caveats. Under each of the various sections they've looked at, they put some of their concerns in there about this particular development, and that I think is the soft underbelly that you might want to be looking at when you come to your communications with them. Well, I'll quote, they say, should development take place in this location, it will be necessary to ensure that no further risks are generated as a result of the development, not only on site, but also downstream where winter flood events already known to arise and are well documented, well, they certainly are. We won't go all the way through the flooding issues because you can read about them yourselves online if you wish to. It's a nice long report, good for the evening. But think about what it will say. The developer will tell you that in fact they can solve a lot of these problems and save a lot of this drainage. But there are issues, we don't agree with that, and more importantly our experts that we've employed, they don't agree with it either. The flow of the River Ada, will increase over time through a number of reasons. One, extreme weather events. We've just had 2 which actually caused it to flood. Whenever you build more buildings, there are treatment works have to be created. Where does the water go? The water goes back into the river. So in fact, every time you put a new development in, it adds more water to the river. And also, if you pave developments, water runs off them somewhat quicker than it would do if in fact it was actually the ground that we've got itself. Climate change will increase sea levels and push the tidal reach up past basically the Mock Bridge further towards this development site. It's interesting, you actually stand and walk up the Mock Bridge at certain times. It's quite interesting to watch the water flow inland. It is tidal to that point, and as you can imagine, when water comes pouring down from up above and the tide is coming in, there's nowhere for it to go except basically onto the land. Mayfield Market Towns will tell you that they will actually try and solve that. They talk about digging big pits, suds, sustainable urban drainage system. Well, that's actually a bit difficult in wheeled clay. In fact, it's also expensive in wheeled clay. So, and also we gather from our expert back there, there's also fallible as well. So it's very easy to come up with solutions on paper. It is far less easy to actually create one in reality. I think the other thing to point out, and the film showed it beautifully, eloquently, you may be able to build houses that are far enough above the floodplain and perhaps drained well enough to remain dry. Are they proposing to lift the actual height of the roads? If they're not, then we can imagine this site will be isolated on more occasions than they are now by flooding events which actually occur. So the mock bridge we can expect to close more often. Okay, how should you comment to Horsham District Council? Let's have a look about the flooding events in Shermanbury, Henfield and Woodmancote. How many times has the mock bridge or Wynham Lane closed in the past 10 years? Any thoughts? How many times? 20? The advance on 20? It's certainly, I mean, it's been advertised as being a 1 in 100 year event. I know it's probably not. Okay, so I think here's a question. Here's a question when you respond. What is the impact of that? Those that have to travel down the 281 or down Wynham Lane or on any of the other roads which actually lead in and out of the area, what impact does that have on your lives? If it's inconvenient, if it causes you problems, if in fact perhaps you can't get to the doctors, if you can't get your children to school, that's the sort of relevant information which you might want to comment to Horsham District Council in terms of flooding in that particular area. If the river floods and inundates your land or your property, tell Horsham District Council. We know that in fact, I think the Wheatsheaf Public House routinely has to actually pump out its cellar because basically it floods. I know people are worried about flooding because they might think it affects their insurance, but in fact Horsham need to understand that this is actually an issue on site. Do you think it's getting worse? Yes. Those who have been here a long time, is this getting worse, the flooding?
Yes.
Yes. You are awake. Just from now on I seem to all asleep there. I think the other thing is that this site is on wheeled clay, which we know is semi-permeable. The advantage of it is it actually retains water for a period of time. You can say that's why it's so soggy. But that in itself is an advantage because it actually stops water flashing straight into the river. So, does surface water flood your property or your land? If it does, what impact does it have on you? Tell Horsham about that. Tell them about the impact of surface water drainage, the lack of it, on your properties. Just out of interest, if you actually live in any of this area, if you dig a hole in the ground in summer, is it still wet? Yeah. We were told that there's no problem with this particular area of the land because it's dry in summer. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't. So I think they're the sort of practical things you need to get back to Horsham so they understand that this is an issue. And I would go back to the roads issue. No one's going to move the roads. No one's going to actually lift the mock bridge so that you can actually get it across it so that the convenience of the transportation is actually important. I also asked to talk about community. This is a community, isn't it? Yes. I think there's a, sorry. I just had a reaction to something that happened to me at the end of last year, sorry. There's a strong community spirit. Less loneliness, more fun. There's 120 clubs and societies all serve Henfield and the surrounding communities of Shermanbury, Woodmancote and Small Dole. People came in and lived because that's attractive. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
You are definitely awake. What impact, you should say, what impact are our 7,000 houses going to have upon that? If you think that's going to have a negative impact, if you enjoy the facilities you've got and you think that might harm it, tell Horsham District Council about it. They are concerned, if I quote again what they said, further work is required to understand and offset pressure on existing settlements, example healthcare, there's a thing, and timing of any delivery would be critical in order to minimise pressures on existing services, particularly in the early stage of any development. The potential for adverse impacts on nearby settlements, for instance, retail centres in Henfield or villages, needs to be understood. Okay, they know about this. Let's make sure they learn more about it with all your consultation. The Henfield High Street retailers support all those in Henfield, the elderly, those without cars, people shop there. What would be the impact? What would be the impact if they are forced out of business because of a large centre opens up somewhere else which you can only reach by car? Tell them about that. If it's important to you, they need to understand that. We've heard about a lack of transport infrastructure. The minor road network, we know now it gets heavy use. I mean, it took me about 10 minutes to get onto the A281 this evening, and in fact, no 7,000 houses have been built. Both Woodmancote and Shermanbury Parish are concerned, I think probably Wylam and Twynham as well, are concerned about the effect on those small roads of, in fact, heavy traffic or increased traffic. Anthony's going to talk about transport systems, but I think the thing is, even if this mythical link to the A23 happened, you know what people are like. We take the shortest possible route. So every small lane, every small path will be taken to try and get wherever they want to do quickest, actually causing damage. I know that, let's say Woodmancote, and I'm particularly concerned, the Woodmancote Council, the southern border of this site is extremely near to Blackstone, which has a strong cultural heritage. It's got a dwelling named in the Domesday Book, which was completed in 1086, and it contains at least 5 listed buildings. It is already a rat run, and that road will become far more of one if in fact you actually look at people trying to get off this site and access other roads as they leave. Any link road's not going to change that. People will still try and take those. Horsham District Council are also concerned about our medical services. Now we know, I think you may all know, that in fact the Calfold and Henfield medical services are reaching capacity. And there's a lot more development going on in Henfield and Calfold and Partridge Green, all the same doctors. Quite how they're going to cope with that, we don't know. Even if you build a building, you've got to find the staff, haven't you? I've almost finished, don't worry about it, I know I'm fine. When I spoke to you, actually to the church, I charged you to actually challenge your parish councils to do more and oppose this development. We've done that, particularly through the inter-parish group. That's what we've been trying to do. But I'm going to say exactly the same thing. We cannot do this anymore without you. If you don't comment, if you don't send back these, just as we were told, these actual planning considerations, then maybe there's a sense taken, but in fact we don't mind this development on the Wheatsheaf Road. Please make sure you do. Let's reject it. Thank you.
So we now have Anthony who's going to give us a bit of background on biodiversity.
There are many issues that Mayfield market towns are presented with when they arrived in this area to put their plans forward. It is an unusual proposal because it actually keeps moving. It started over in mid-Sussex and it's gradually moved, and now it's literally a couple of fields away from this village. Over the years, people in Henfield, and I've spoken to many of them, it was a little bit of, oh, don't worry, it's somewhere over there, because it very much felt somewhere over there, but it has gradually moved right to the boundaries of the village here. And I think it's worth actually just giving people here, some of you will know, others won't, the background of why Mayfield market towns are in this particular location. Back in 2010, under the then Labour government, there was something called the South East Plan, where every region was given a housing number to deliver. And Crawley, Mid-Sussex and Horsham got together and said, right, maybe one of the ways that we can deliver this is with a new market town. I love the way they call it a market town. Basically, a new town. And they put some consultants out to work on this, and the main focus was the A23 corridor. They very sensibly said, right, whatever we do, we need it to be very near the main route going north-south. So the consultants did their work, and they came back to the councils and they reported back, and the location that they identified was in and around Hickstead. And the councils looked at that, and for whatever reason, I at the time have no idea why, they rejected it. And they said, no, this doesn't work for us. And as we know, in the meantime, in the next 10 years, all of those councils have gone off and built houses elsewhere. We've heard tonight about, from Mims, the Northern Arc in Burgess Hill, which should deliver 3,500 houses. We know North Horsham is going to take a lot of houses, which is already in process of getting planning at the moment. We've all seen, I'm sure, the massive amount of housing going on around Broadridge Heath. So it wasn't the councils rejecting housing, it was the councils rejecting that particular location. Sadly, they had to put that document into the public domain. And some very clever planning consultant saw this and thought, hey, this is an opportunity. I'm going to look into this a little bit more. And he approached some of his developer friends, and his developer friends, one of the, I won't mention a name, but one of the very large developers that has done a lot of work in mid-Sussex. Too long, Geoff? Far too long. Right, I'll cut it short. But the reason the reason that Mayfield's existed and have come here is it started in Hickstead, which is of course in mid-Sussex. There was no, under that proposal, there was nothing planned for Horsham, and it has ended up entirely in Horsham. Now I'll get to the point. Right, transport. And right, one of the main issues we believe is transport. As do our planning consultants, and probably do many of you. We believe that this area is fundamentally unsustainable in transport terms. The local highway network is already close to or above capacity, and the additional traffic contributes to severe congestion at up to 10 junctions and links. No additional roads are actually proposed by Mayfields outside the site, apart from what we are told is a link road to the A23. No one has any idea, and we have asked both the district councils and West Sussex where this link road is. In this room tonight, there are Mayfield representatives. It would be extremely helpful if they could tell us, as the community, where is this road going to be? Is it through the bottom of my garden? It would be very helpful. Leading on from there, they are proposing bus lanes, or buses, should we say. So they are proposing 2 additional bus routes. One of them will be from the centre of the new town to Sussex railway station, through Hurstpier Point, and I jest not, and that will be confirmed and Horsham can confirm. That is the route. The second one is to Prairie, which will be a little bit of a round robin route, about an hour, so I'm sure that will be extremely popular. The development would be, and we've got this from our consultants, totally contradictory to the air quality management areas at Stonepound Crossroads in Sussex and at Cowfold, both of which will experience more severe congestion, much more than they do today. And there is no mitigation proposed for any of this. I could go on about this because it really goes on. It will also severe congestion in Hurstpier Point High Street. It will cause more congestion on the A23 itself, the A23 A2 300 junction, and me being rather selfish, I live in Wynham Lane. Every morning I drive up Wynham Lane to take my daughter to school. I go to turn right on the A272. It takes me some mornings 5 minutes, and I am a queue of 1 car. So, and this is their main north-south route in and out of the settlement. Please explain. Sorry. Oh. Ecology. Well, according to Mayfield's ecologist, there's absolutely nothing of value on this site. Nothing at all. Which is why it's very easy for them to promise to increase biodiversity by 10%. You know, they get a couple of squirrels and they're there. But that wouldn't be a problem if there was nothing of value. But our consultant doesn't agree, and I would think that people living here, if you go out walking, cycling or riding your horses, you know that there is a mass of biodiversity nature out there. And I'll just quickly read what our consultants said on this, because it's interesting. It's not all stuff I've seen. The site is traversed by 3 watercourses, has 28 lakes and ponds, a wetland area and floods annually. All properties that massively increase the biodiversity of an area. So it might be inconvenient for us, but the animals love it. Our ecologists found 8 definite and possibly 12 bat species, and tells us the watery habitats, woodlands, 20 kilometres of hedgerows with ditches, abundant flowering plants and veteran trees provides excellent bat foraging and roosting habitat. Sorry Geoff, it's going on a bit. The site is a hot spot for barn owls, great crested newts, dragonflies and farmland birds. A high number of legally protected and nationally scarce species were found across all genres in a very short window of surveying, and many more are likely present. Other species present are badgers, hedgehogs, grasslake, snowworm, brown hair-streaked butterfly, toad, nightingales, which is a very important one, yellowhammer, skylark, swift, and many more. And finally, I'll finish on that. The Sussex Wildlife Trust, who recently, as you've probably read in the local papers, are partners of Horsham District Council to deliver their green agenda. This is what they say about the Mayfield site. Quote, the ecological integrity of Horsham District is very much threatened by this proposal. It presents habitat fragmentation on a scale not seen in Horsham District for many decades, at a time when it is even less acceptable than ever. Sussex Wildlife Trust promote a wilder Sussex, and this proposal represents a significant step in the wrong direction. Thank you. Lastly, sorry, landscape. I'll rattle through this one. We and our landscape consultants are surprised at the lack of attention being given to the value of landscape, particularly given its proximity to the South Downs National Park, whose exemplary landscape-led local plan came into adoption last year. Horsham District Council have relied heavily on a 2003 landscape study, which was undertaken before the formation of the South Downs National Park. Whilst Horsham's study makes mention of this, it is largely in the context of views to the park rather than assessment of views from the park. This is a huge shortcoming and something we would hope the South Downs National Park will make much of in what we hope will be their response to the consultation. With Mayfield site proximity and visibility from the top of the downs, this is a specific impact which our consultants believe adversely affects the setting of the South Downs National Park, which is the most protected landscape in the country. We unfortunately believe that Horsham's own documentation is not actually a reliable piece of evidence, and it actually is very conflicting in the way it is written. If this scheme were allowed, development of this scale in such close proximity to the national park would cause irreparable damage, especially to Devil's Dyke, which remains one of Sussex's most popular tourist attractions, as we all know, and famously described by the artist John Constable, the grandest view in the world.
Thank you very much, Anthony. And I just, again, remind about your experience. It's about how it affects you in those areas such as biodiversity, if you actually take walks, if you actually have transport issues, give them your experience. And on that point, I'd now like to ask Pauline McBride from Sussex Prairie Gardens. We've had a number of speakers at our events. We had Robert Worsley, we've had Rainey Brooks, commented last time, she was in the papers as well. We've had Georgie Salvage. This is Pauline's agreed to say a few words about.
Hello everyone, good evening. Some of you may already know me. My name is Pauline McBride. My husband Paul and I made Sussex Prairie Gardens in 2008, and we're going to stay there. If we look at this map, Sussex Prairies, for those of you who don't know, it appears somewhere bang in the centre of the proposed Mayfield market town. And I wanted to speak to you tonight because I wanted to correct maybe some misapprehensions or rumours that have been circulating about Sussex Prairies, because Paul and I, we are not selling Sussex Prairies, we are not selling moorland farms. We have not signed any undertaking to sell the land, we have not signed any options, we are staying and we are trying to protect our beautiful part of the Sussex Weald. The only problem is, actually, we've only got 32 acres. I wish I owned a hell of a lot more, because I would be able to say that I'm not going to sell that either. But you see, we're under pressure here, and all of us need to step up to the plate and make known our feelings about what this market town could mean to our beautiful environment. Paul and I created Sussex Prairies, a beautiful garden which I hope many of you come and enjoy and love to spend your time in. We are part of this community. 20,000 people come to our garden every year, and I'm hoping to increase that number too. But 20,000 people make a significant impact upon this community. They come into Henfield, they come to your shops, to the pubs, they stay in your B&Bs, in your Airbnbs, they stay in your hotel, they drink coffee and cake, although I wish they wouldn't, in your tea shops, as well as my own. So you see, we're bringing people into this area, and they come because it's a fabulous and beautiful place, an unspoilt and pristine environment. Now, I can imagine what it might be like if I get concreted around. My whole beautiful garden will become quite a different place, and possibly quite a place that people won't want to come to anymore. So,
to represent all of you in Parliament. My name's Andrew Griffith. I was elected, goodness me, it feels like longer ago, but I was elected on the 12th of December, and already I have raised this issue on the floor of the House of Commons. I've lived here with my family for the last 12 years, and we moved here because we value the countryside, our natural heritage, our history, our dark skies, our environment, and the quality of life that people should and have in this part of the world. And you need to know that I am going to do everything in my power to oppose Mayfield Market Town, and I knew, and I've just got here, and I'm planning on being around for a long time too, with your support. So you have my complete support. And our colleagues from Mayfield Market Town who are here tonight need to understand that. We're not going away. So this is a fight that they cannot win. Now, Geoff and Malcolm and Anthony and Pauline, who spoke incredibly eloquently. Well done, Pauline, that was brilliant, thank you. You've got a new convert, because I have not yet visited the Prairie Garden, and I'm going to go down there and see that. But you've laid out perfectly the arguments that need to be made. And I could, and I'll come back and do this another time, I mean, I could wax lyrical for half an hour, and Anthony and Geoff have heard this a number of times, about some of the deficiencies in the housing planning system, and some of the fact that the houses we need are not houses in areas like Mayfield Market Town. We're changing as a society. We have already changed as a society. The houses we need are sustainable. They're not built on green land. They're built in the places that people already live, where there's access to GPs, where there's access to schools, where we don't necessarily have to jump in our cars and pollute the environment, where as an ageing society, we're able to access public transport, so we don't always have to rely on the motor car to get around. We need different sorts of houses. We don't need the same big houses Some of us are getting a little bit older, we'll be happy to trade down and have different types of dwellings. So the whole process and system needs some work. We're opening up new parts of the country, we're investing in the north, we're putting all of the infrastructure in, we're trying to rebalance our economy away from the southeast. And yet, what do we see but more and more of the same? We're following an outdated model that's already beyond its time. But these aren't arguments, to be honest, that we're going to solve in the next 19 days. So my advice to you tonight is that we have to mobilise, we have to embellish our arguments, and the best way you can do that is to support the good work that LAMS have done in engaging planning consultants to give us the very sharpest arguments. So we've got an axis about can we make our arguments in the sharpest way that fall within those that are admissible in the planning process. And the answer to that is we can, and however much we give, we should give that money to LAMS to go and do that on our behalf. The second thing is that we need to get those in. So we need to make those arguments ourselves. And you've heard from a number of the speakers tonight, and I shall be putting in my own fulsome response as well, and I shall be encouraging everybody to do so. But it's really, really, really important. Don't leave it to somebody else. And then the third thing that we need to do is to absolutely make sure that when the councillors and the council sit down and consider all of the different options, that they hear as loud as possible a roar from all of the people in this area about exactly what will happen and their opposition and the depth of that opposition and how far we will go to oppose, so that when they evaluate which of the sites, and some of them are owned by the government, so some of them are highly deliverable, some of them are absolutely going to be delivered in terms of the housing for the future, they hear the very opposite in respect to Mayfield Town. That this is something that will have opposition to the end of its days, and that opposition will be at scale and from every part of the community and from every parish council and every town council and the councillors and the Member of Parliaments. That's where we need to get to, ladies and gentlemen, by the 30th of March. So you've got my full support. I will do everything I can. My services are at your disposal. I will raise this on the floor of the House of Commons. I will raise this with ministers. But make no doubt, at the end of the day, it's not a decision that I can make, or would make for that matter, or Mims, but this is a decision that will have to be made as part of the process. So the best thing we can do, and you're clearly all doing that by being here tonight, but the best thing we can do is engage in that process, give it our best shot, and then we will win, then we will prevail, and then this thing that has blighted so many of your lives for so many years will go away, and we will move on, and we can all just get on with our lives and get on with our communities and all of the other really important challenges that as a society we've got to come together and solve. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Just to introduce myself, my name's Nikki, Ernest. I chair the Inter-Parish group, and just to give a bit more information about that, that's a group of 17 parish councils, so much wider than the 3 parishes that are directly affected by the Mayfield scheme. So it's 17 parish councils, 27,000 electors, and those parish councils are all wholly opposed to the Mayfield Market Town scheme. I just want to make some final words on objections around deliverability, and after that we'll move on to the Q&A so you can all ask any questions that you have. On deliverability, key things to bear in mind is, and recognise that Mayfield Market Towns, as we've heard, don't have acceptable answers to transport, flooding or landscape issues. They don't have the services infrastructure to support their development, certainly not at the beginning, and that would just place a huge strain on the existing services in the area. And a key point that Pauline's talked about is they don't have the land, or they certainly don't have all of the land for their development. I think Pauline referred to her acreage. We know of at least one other landowner with a significantly large land holding that also isn't prepared to sell to Mayfields. And we estimate that about a third of their scheme they don't have the land for, and are unlikely to, unless Horsham District Council are prepared to compulsory purchase it. which is a very lengthy and unwieldy process. I don't know if there are any other landowners in the room at the moment, but if there are, you're not prepared to sell, please make those points known to Horsham District Council in responses. As a result of all of this, you could see that the Mayfield scheme is an extremely high-risk project for Horsham to actually proceed with it. And I think, as has been touched on by Andrew, they have many other options in the 9 strategic sites in their consultation that are probably better than this one. A final point to bear in mind, and to bear in mind in your responses, is the number of houses that Horsham are planning for. When you look at their proposed plan, one of the questions they ask is how many houses do you think should be delivered? Should it be 1,000 per year, 1,200, 1,400? And something to bear in mind is official projections estimate that the increase in population of Horsham over the planned period will be 17,000, so 17,000 additional people in the district. If you think about the average occupancy of a dwelling, that means that the requirement is for about 7,000 houses, not the minimum of 17,000 if you were to take the option of 1,000 houses a year, which is the minimum that Horsham have in their plan. So please let them know what you feel about their housing projections as well. It seems from our calculations that 1,000 is a high number, and that's the lowest number that they've put in there. And so please comment on that too. Okay, with that said, I think we're going to move on to Q&A. So clearly we want to get as many questions in as we can. So if you could be brief with your questions, and panel, perhaps if you could be brief with your answers as well, that would be appreciated. If you could raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I think we have 2 rows.
Okay, this one here.
Hi, it's Mark Beard. I live in Henfield, West LA. I came to the meeting with the town planners when they did the roadshow. I believe that Mayfields have promised schools and doctors and other facilities. According to the planner that I spoke to, there is no legal responsibility for them to actually deliver those. In fact, they can't because it comes from the central government. Is that correct? And is that something we should be raising?
You want to take the panel, a LAMS response or a MP response?
Actually, could I ask Joy to maybe, because it's actually a county.
Hello, I'm Joy Dennis. I'm West Sussex County Councillor. I represent the Hurstby, Point and Bolney area, and obviously been involved since obviously it's been moved from Mid-Sussex. Where was the gentleman asked the question? I'm sorry, back there. Hi. From a housing perspective, when those developments are put together, the housing, the schools, the developers can actually promise to build them. So they can build them, usually now in conjunction with an academy, or a free school. So they can promise them in terms of the actual building because they could build it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there'll be an academy to take it on. So it could sit there potentially as an empty school. As far as the GP surgeries are concerned, that could be the same because, again, you can build a building, but you can't necessarily find the staff or the GPs. That's the other issue that can't necessarily be found. So in a way, it's not about necessarily national government. They can build the building as part of the deal, but as I said, you've got to find the academy to take it on, and that's been an issue as we've seen across the county. Horsham itself has suffered from that problem up in the north.
Example, in the North Horsham, what I call a fiasco with the building that didn't get done and it still goes on, there is one big area which I won't name the person who owns it, to build in North Horsham. He had to commit to a hospital as well as a school, and he told me only a few months ago that he did the school and was prepared to do the hospital, but they came back to him and said that the National Health Service couldn't run the hospital, couldn't staff it, couldn't provide the facilities, and so he was able to scrub it from his balance sheet that he wouldn't have to build a hospital as part of having got the plan in North Horsham.
Boris and his friends decided to promote Gatwick Airport for runway 2. Is it impossible to factor that in at this stage, and could it have a detrimental effect on the objectives tonight?
I can touch on that slightly. I mean, Gatwick Airport, second runway, and that's putting aside their proposal to use the standby runway, but a full second runway at Gatwick Airport, that did come up in the last Horsham hearing in 2015, and the inspector, the government inspector's response to that was, given that there is no agreed position on that, it shouldn't be considered part of this consultation. So it was basically sort of put to one side because there was no plan to build a second runway. And
a couple of quick points. There's no mention of agriculture and loss of agricultural land. I looked on the ONS site today and found that we now can only provide 52% of our agricultural needs. And we in fact now obviously import 48% on all the carbon issues associated with that. This is a national problem, and this goes towards it. So there's no mention of the fact that there's more agricultural land being built on. And the other quick one is, somebody mentioned at the beginning about displacement from Brighton. There's about 8,000 HMOs in Brighton now, which is houses that have been taken away from families and converted to student accommodation. So there's a massive pressure on housing in Brighton. And it looks like you people are going to pay the price of that. If you go into Brighton now, there's a lot of development, but it's all for students and not for the populace.
Yeah. I'll try not to broaden it out too much because, again, it's a big, big topic, and it's not the things that we need to respond to. But there's a big focus, and one of the announcements on the housing in yesterday's budget was 400 million to release brownfield land. So over time, the reason we're not going to need sites like this, and why it would be an absolute folly and historically criminal to develop this particular site, is because we're going to look back and we're going to be able to release some of the land within the green belt. These are directions of policy. It's not all going to happen overnight. If you look at the green belt, that's pushing a lot of development, because as we know, this will be marketed as a London dormitory town. London and a little bit of Brighton, but that's what it's going to be marketed at. They're going to talk about how close it is to Sussex, how they're going to have regular bus services, and the wonderful, which I've yet to see, but the wonderful, reliable train service with lots of spare seats and capacity running up and down to London all the time. That is what's going to be on page 1 of the marketing if this ever happened. And actually, the direction of travel is profoundly away from that. It's building, as I think Mims said, in town centres. It's bringing those back to life. It's developing brownfield land. There's an awful lot of brownfield sites around both Brighton, everywhere north, as you get further north in the borough. One of the developments that we will do is look at the old, light industrial sites. And we all sort of know them, it used to be a petrol station, then it was a car mechanics, now it's not really being used very much, it's a bit of a lock-up, it's a timber yard. We've all got them, even in some of our smallest towns, we've got these brownfield sites. And we can unlock a huge amount of housing in places that people want to live by unlocking those. So there was an announcement yesterday of £400 million. In terms of agricultural land, I wouldn't spend too much time. It's a very good point, sir. I wouldn't spend too much time in this particular response about the quality of the agricultural land. But again, as a society, we do need that. I mean, we're going to see over the next 5 to 6 weeks, if what these scientists say is correct, and I have every reason to believe it is, about the challenges of building a supply chain that's too global. And not enough self-reliance. That's a trend. We've all been on that journey since the end of the Second World War, and there are prices and costs associated with it. And when we look at our food miles and what everybody talks about in terms of the climate emergency, which all of our local councils have fully declared, so I don't know how legally admissible it is, but I would probably mention some of the changes that are coming down in terms of land use because of our need to manage the climate and the environment. And you very visually brought to life what that's doing in flooding. And it's not just here. I don't think anyone thinks it's just here, but it's not just here. I've spent most of the last 5 or 6 weeks standing up to my knees in floodwater across most parts of the Ada and the Arun River Valley. So generically, it's a very good point. Whether that will be the clincher, I don't know, but clearly that's the direction of travel we're on. So it also speaks to, if we can win this time, I honestly think the direction of planning policy and the realisation of the different sort of homes we need in society, as well as the fact that actually our population isn't growing. There are certain aspects and certain places of demand, but on a macro level, the challenge we're going to have in the plan, the strategic development plan that we put together after this one, is going to be very different. It's going to be about how we deal with a society that's actually shrinking, and how we manage to build societies that work equally well as we age, as we fall as a population.
Thank you, Richard Searles, who can't stand up too long. This is not a question, it's actually a suggestion. And I'd just like to congratulate all those people that have actually put out material for us to read. And I hold a piece of it, I think it's called a flyer, in my hand. And it's from the joint parish councils. And I think it's not going to be the last one that they will produce. So this is about any future edition of this. I think it was extremely ill-advised to say that one of the reasons for objecting is because it's undeliverable. I mean, that, to my mind, that doesn't make sense. That would turn people to a situation where they say, okay, in that case, what's the big deal? I shouldn't need to bother, should I? So
thank you so much to everyone at Lambs for the fantastic work you've done and all the time that you've put in for us. You said you need another £15,000. Can you tell us, has anyone worked out, if we all do contribute, which I'm sure we're all happy to, how much you want per household to make it work, and how do we pay?
Nice. Again, Lambs is a very it's a concept as much. It's obviously embodied in the people, and there is a core committee of about 10 or 11 people who do an awful lot of the work, but it's equally a very wide group of volunteers who come and help put up posters, and then when they're knocked down, put them up again, and then when they're knocked down, put them up again. As to specifically the amount, we haven't done a specific calculation, if I'm honest. Last time, I think, firstly, we'd recognise and we're delighted to see how many people have come here, notwithstanding some of the health concerns. Last time when we had 600 people in the church at Henfield, as I said, we raised £30,000. At that point, we think we had about 6,000 people in the room, and we were asking... 600 people. 6,000, no. Paul, that was a good day, wasn't it? So 600 people in the room are asking for 50 quid each of the people that are there. I think we're not going to be expecting. The key thing is we've got a very wide network of people who are subscribed to Lambs and to the website. I think one of the key points that I've said to everybody here, clearly we'd appreciate people donating what they can. One of the things that will happen, and I think it's maybe on Wednesday, is it? I think are the flyers going to everybody? I'm looking to Monday. How many are going out?
20,052.
20,052, because Carol and Ruth took them over to the off to Rochester to actually get them delivered. Are being delivered by mail to every single household in this area. That's the sort of commitment we've got. We hope, because that flyer has on it information including how to donate, as indeed there is on the website. There's a large button which says how to donate. And what we hope is that a lot of people will press that button, and rather than just relying on well, it's probably about 300 in the hall here tonight, although that would be very grateful, in exactly the same way as you have been asked to not only make sure you respond, but actually go out and find some of your neighbours and explain to them and help them understand how to respond. To go to some of the things, and I know some people have commented that it's quite difficult to manage online. We've actually got a video which I was going to ask, and I will in a moment just actually ask Ryan to put up, we can quickly show. It might trigger a couple more questions.
It is not the simplest consultation to respond to. Not everybody has decent internet access or are computer literate enough to do it. So Woodmancote Parish Council is actually doing a drop-in clinic which will be taking place on the 19th of March at the Blackstone playing fields between 5 and 7 p.m. So if anybody wants help in terms of the actual process of submitting your response, come along there, and one of the parish councillors will be on hand to actually help you. The other thing you can do is Henfield's Computer Club, which runs from 9:30 till midday on Wednesdays. So you've only got 2 Wednesdays left, Wednesday the 18th and Wednesday the 25th. That actually takes place in the garden room at Henfield Hall, and you can come along and people will be on hand to help you there. The other thing is you can actually submit your response by post. That is your democratic right. Horsham will actually tell you that they want you to submit online. It's a lot easier for them if you do, but it is your democratic right to submit by post. But you need to submit the form. So my understanding is there are some forms at the back of the room. There will be forms available at the walk-in surgery in Blackstone playing fields on the 19th between 5 and 7. And also a number of the parish councils do have copies of those forms as well. So if you want a copy of one of those forms to fill out and send in, please do ask. The other thing to say is, if it's not necessarily a question of one response per household. So if you are lucky enough to have a significant other, I would suggest that you both actually stick a response.
Thanks, Craig.
I'll get Henfield listeners. I've already put my objection in, but my wife is holding fire until after tonight's meeting. The video does raise a point. The various headings are colour banded on the Horsham District Council's draft plan site, and some of them, which we are objecting to, are banded as neutral. I think the colour is a sort of buff colour. Now, my spies tell me that in order for Horsham to have come to, let's say, a neutral opinion on, for example, flooding, they would have to have had commissioned a report from an outside consultant, HTC, lacking the expertise in these areas. So it would be helpful, I think, if we knew who wrote these reports, what the detail is, and how we find them in the sort of by burrowing into the Horsham District Council website. Indeed, can we find them?
I think you've raised a very good point, actually, and certainly in us looking at the supporting evidence that Horsham have provided to their assessments, we've also struggled to find reports that support the assessments that are shown on those charts. There is some supporting evidence on their website. There is some supporting evidence which actually shows contrary ratings to what they show in their table. So I think some feedback is that, you know, people should have their views on what they feel those colour ratings should be. But I think there is also feedback that there is no supporting evidence to justify those ratings in many cases.
I don't know if anybody wants to add anything.
I think, just to say, Nikki, I mean, that's, you know, as Nikki has done, as we have done, we've searched for the evidence. There is the strategic flooding report that is actually provided to take flooding as an example. They do have those. What Horsham have been very clear about, and we're actually going to visit them on Monday, is that those ratings are their current ratings. They've been fairly clear that whilst they have done some evidential work themselves, they've also relied substantially on evidence provided by the developers. As I pointed out, they haven't necessarily looked at all the evidence provided by LAMS or others at this point, and that's why they say those ratings can change. And indeed, that is the whole objective that we have. is to make sure that we put in and assist in providing the evidence to help those ratings to change. There is one particular area of evidence that is obviously absent, in that we've asked for some specific evidence about the Mayfield's submissions, which is not there. And we have been told that because this is delivered under the Performance Planning Agreement, the PPA, these are confidential. Which I don't quite understand how public consultation is working when some of this is being held as confidential, and we will be asking about that. We understand obviously some of it is commercially sensitive, and that may be the case, but if these issues such as how can the council have confidence that somehow 3,500 houses will be built in this area by 2036 without a detailed plan as to how to get there, or any plan, and remember we haven't yet got a plan even for a link road, is something that the public would like to be able to comment on, with some evidence to comment against. And we don't know whether there's anything in Horsham District Council or not, but that appears to be the position. So please go digging, and do highlight, and I would suggest this is a good part of the response, highlight in your responses if you can't find something, because it's a pretty fair point. Either, as we found in a couple of places, contradictory evidence, which we'll highlight, or indeed lack of evidence, which is another good reason to highlight it. And finally, of course, some evidence of your own.
It relates to special habitats and the impact that this development looks at within 20 kilometres of those special habitats. Now they are talking about special habitats like the Arundel Valley, Pagham Harbour Nature Reserve, Walmer Forest, and so in a sense this development will impact on those. But they haven't done any assessment on any other site, which they should do. And the thing is that most biodiversity in the UK does not live in nature reserves or special habitat. It lives in open countryside. And there is no assessment at all, and it is very neutral. In fact, I think it's green on their assessment that there's an environmental impact, and that is absolute rubbish. Henfield did do sort of emergency surveys, and we just found on one survey in the spring that sort of eight red data listed species. So the district council have a duty on all developments now to their developments should not adversely affect biodiversity, they should enhance it. And there's absolutely no way that this development could in any way enhance habitat.
There you go. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. As I say, Mayfield Market Towns did actually put ecology survey in a number of years ago. We haven't actually seen the one under the PPA. One assumes they have put something in, but we are not party to that. It does seem extraordinary that Horsham have not done any work to this effect. All they're saying is SSSIs are important. It's as if nothing else matters, which is why we've had a comprehensive ecology survey done. It's a big document. It was submitted to Horsham last September, and what is absolutely clear from what we are seeing with the ratings and everything, it has not been looked at all. So it would appear, and we believe rather unfairly, that a developer can put in evidence, and that is actually taken into account and put into the ratings. A group such as ourselves, representing the communities, can put in a document, not written at home by any of us, by a qualified ecologist, and it is completely ignored. So yes, please comment about that. Thank you.
No, please. How they expect the medical profession in this area to cope with so many more patients. Already they are working to their full capacity, and over the whole country, the country is short of doctors and nurses.
I think, again, good point for feedback in your response. Hopefully you'll put that in.
Are there any facts and figures about the road traffic accidents in the areas over the last 10 years, say? Because we live in Bob Lane, and we know every single time there's a serious accident on the A272, because everybody tries to come along the lane we live in, and down Wyndham Lane, in totally unsuitable vehicles, don't know the roads, don't know how to drive, and they end up crashing. There was one recently over the bridge in Wyndham Lane. So are there any facts and figures that can be used in an argument? Because obviously 7,000 homes, 7,000 vehicles minimum, we're all going to have to leave that area somehow, and even just with an access road. The 272 gets started up every day at Cowfold, and more and more accidents occurring.
Yeah.
Roger Richards, and I live in Blackstone. On the subject of commuting, as I understand it, one of the things that Mayfield is saying is that they will provide, in some magical way, sufficient jobs within the new town that for everybody who lives there, so no one will need to commute. Now, is that something that's so absurd we can ignore it, or is it something that we need to strongly rebut?
I think one of the interesting things, if you actually look at the caveats that are again within Horsham District Council, they actually raise this as being of some doubt. The point's being made, if this is supposed to be overflow from Brighton and some overflow from Crawley, one assumes these people actually are employed, and that in fact they're not going to give up their job and then move down and take that job. But anyway, if it did work, it would only work for a few months, wouldn't it? Because people then get better jobs and move somewhere else, but not move home. So I think probably creating pottery and jewellery and all these other jobs. Then think about white van man. How many white vans will be coming in and out of the place, delivering and raw? I hand you back.
Just, I think we have to recognise that more home working is likely, and I think it's going to be something that's quite difficult to refute. But we have been looking at studies to actually say where, for instance, looking at studies of North Hertfordshire and Letchford and other market towns, is there any evidence to prove that it could happen? Because we would obviously like to be able to refute it, but equally, let's look to Mayfield to prove that it could happen. Because if they're just stating it, and we've all heard lots of things that have just been stated, that's a big risk for a councillor to say, oh, that's going to be fine. Sorry, Andrew just wanted to say one other point on data.
It was a small remark to Geoff, just as another way I could help. But if there are specific points of data that we think putting down a parliamentary question would help reveal, I'll be, of course, very happy to do that, anything that I can do within my power. I'll do one little bit of fundraising for Geoff, if you like. Sorry. When you think about how much you can give, think about, how much would you put in if you filled up the car with petrol? I know that's not cheap. Or maybe how much you'd spend on a big dinner out. Because this is everybody's future that we're talking about. It's the future generations that will look to us. So please give as much as you can and try and think of, really push a little bit how much you could afford this time, because it's our one chance to get this right.
I think we've got time for...
Steve Bowden, first of all, can I add my thanks and support for everything you've been doing and saying tonight. We're all behind you on that. Clearly, Mayfield is the single biggest issue presented by the new Horsham District Plan. But in the consultation document, it also shows us 6 other fields around Henfield to be developed, with another 425 houses, 2 fields in Smallville with another 51 houses. And in addition to all the fields that are outlined in the plan, we know right now there are developers trying to put forward other fields, 2 in Henfield, 1 for 35 houses, 1 for 60 houses. So in responding to the consultation, we need to address all those issues. Do you have any thoughts on all the other bits, please?
I think clearly people should respond to whatever they want to respond to, and like I said, for the inter-parish group, you know, it's a group of 17 parish councils, which is far and wide. You know, they have similar issues to Henfield with developments in their own area. You know I've got to attend a planning appeal next week for an enormous retirement village in the small village of Alborn. You know, it's happening everywhere. So I think absolutely people should respond to whatever they choose to in the consultation. This specific session here has been particularly about what we should focus on with Mayfield Market Towns, but clearly people have their views on all sorts of content of the plan.
Thank you. Same rate as last time. Given that this is being televised, as many people would have noticed, and I suspect there will be no minutes, could you answer the question as to whether or not Mayfields were asked to be here and talk to us and answer questions? And secondly, I've heard nothing at all about conflict. All of these parishes that have joined the combined group obviously have visions of their own about how their populations and how their villages should develop. Nobody's said that one of the reasons for objecting is that there's in direct conflict with the plans for Henfield. I know Henfield's got no plans for a bypass. But it
No, not again. Not again.
But it's actually, yes.
They weren't specifically invited, I don't believe. I think if they want to hold public consultations, it's up to them. However, they are in the room.
To answer your question?
Well, just to confirm that I've spoken to both the leader of Mid-Sussex Council and the chief executive. They'll be putting in a very fulsome response, again, on behalf of those communities, because it's opposed to their own plans, their own aspirations, and as you say, you know, it'll absolutely melt down the traffic and the air quality, particularly in Sussex. So they're definitely on side. You know, Mims and I are coordinating so that we take this from a two-pronged approach, including all of those communities as well.
It would be nice to know if the representative from Mayfield would like to express his regret. I know he's not responsible for it, but just to say, well, to comment on that.
Can I just say it is a quite a sensitive area, and Malcolm did relate what happened to him in great detail, but without getting into the law of defamation, even by saying what someone said to you, however vitriolic and threatening it was, doesn't make it true. Now, I'm not saying it was true or it wasn't true, but you've got to be very careful in saying things about people, making threats like that, which could be criminal acts, if you're not certain they're true. Yes, you have a right to report it, you tell the police, but to actually publish it, you are potentially in danger, because if that statement itself, the underlying statement, isn't true, that it was Mayfields who caused this to happen. No, I was just saying that's what you've got to be careful of. But I'm sorry, what was the point of the question?
I just felt there was a representative from Mayfields at the meeting, and they were invited to express their regret that that had happened, as I understood it. But nobody was saying that it was Mayfields that had arranged it. But I understand that you're talking from a legal point of view.
One's got to be a little
so
careful.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay.
All I will tell you is that when he returned home, he was very, very shaken. So I don't know what was said to him, but it seriously upset him, and he does not lie.
Got all your questions. I think we'll close the questions there because it's getting on a bit, and I'll hand back to Geoff.
And I wouldn't like to take too long at all, other than to just thank our panel, and in particular our councillors who are present, our MPs, of course, who have been so supportive and talked so vocally, and I think really won our support as a result of their new appointments. So many thanks, Andrew, yourself and Mims. To the rest of the team, to the members of the Parish group, to Pauline, but most of all for you for coming out. I'll just remind you of the three things that we've asked, which is whatever you do respond with your own stories. Please have a look at the detail. We've made it as easy as possible, so please use the website. Secondly, please, if you can donate. Andrew, thank you very much for the suggestion of a tank of petrol or a dinner. But please do. And third and most importantly, please get 5 or 6 others to do the same. Because it's not the people in this room who will necessarily make this help to go away. It's the experience of as many people as possible. So please help us get to them. Thank you all for coming.